The air in the office hangs thick and cold, smelling of polished wood and my husband's expensive, cloying cologne. It's his scent, clinging to everything, even the silence after he walks out. My name, a ghost on the door, I just closed behind him.
Fired.
He said the word, sharp and clean like a blade cutting through something vital. My chest feels hollow, a drum echoing with the sound of my own heartbeat, too fast, too loud. My eyes trace the familiar lines of the room, the desk we picked out together, the plant in the corner I've kept alive for years. It all feels alien now, mocking me with its quiet familiarity in the face of this seismic shift. The glass wall overlooks the city, sparkling indifferent below. I see myself reflected there, a stranger in my own life, framed by the emptiness he just carved out. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, it helps me more than you know. Before the cold silence, before the word redundant, there was a life built on whispered plans and shared dreams. We started this company together, piece by agonizing piece. Late nights fueled by cheap coffee and the fierce belief that we were forging something real, something lasting. He was the visionary, the face. I was the architect, the one who built the structure, the systems, the culture. My fingerprints were on everything, from the first crumpled business plan to the complex operational models that made us successful. My name was on the incorporation papers, a co-founder, a partner in every sense of the word. Our home life and work life were interwoven, a single tapestry of ambition and affection. We talked shop over dinner, celebrated small victories with bottles of champagne, weathered storms huddled together against the uncertainty. It was our world, our kingdom, built on a foundation I thought was solid, unbreakable. I trusted him implicitly. He was my husband, my best friend, my confidant. We knew each other's tells, the small anxieties, the grand aspirations. We finished each other's sentences, anticipated each other's needs. The company was our first child, demanding, exhausting, but infinitely rewarding. My role was head of operations, a title that felt too simple for the sprawling, intricate web I managed daily. I knew every employee's name, their families, their struggles. I knew the pulse of the business, the tiny vibrations that signaled health or impending illness. I was the company's nervous system, feeling everything, reacting, adapting. My identity was so tied to this place, to this work, to us. The cracks were too subtle to notice at first, or maybe I just didn't want to see them. Little things. Late nights that weren't spent working on pressing deadlines. A new phone he was suddenly protective of. A change in cologne, something sweeter, less familiar. He started missing our dinner tradition, citing urgent, vague meetings. His eyes, when they met mine, seemed a little less present, a little more guarded. He was building walls I couldn't see through, and my heart, in its naive confidence, didn't even register the construction sounds. I attributed it to stress, the pressures of growth, the demands of success. I doubled down on my work, thinking if I just made things smoother, easier for him, the distance would close. I worked harder, longer hours, perfecting the machine we had built. I was so busy maintaining the structure, I didn't see the rot setting in at the foundation. Then came the day he called me into his office. Not our shared office, but his, the one that had become solely his domain over the years. My stomach tightened, a low thrum of unease. He was sitting behind his large, imposing desk, the city still sparkling indifferently outside his window. He didn't look at me directly. His hands were clasped on the polished wood, knuckles white. The air conditioning felt colder than usual. He cleared his throat. The words came out stiff, formal, utterly devoid of the warmth that had defined our partnership, our marriage. We've had to make some difficult decisions regarding restructuring, he said, the corporate jargon a cruel mask over something ugly. Your role, head of operations, it's being eliminated. My mind struggled to process the syllables. Eliminated? My role? The one I built from the ground up? The one I lived and breathed? I heard myself laugh, a short, sharp, disbelieving sound. What are you talking about? Eliminated? That's impossible. You need this role. We need this role. He finally looked up, and his eyes were cold, distant. They held no recognition of the woman he had sworn to love, the partner he had sworn to build a future with. The company is moving in a new direction, he stated flatly. We need someone with different expertise.
Someone.
Fresh.
Fresh.
The word hung in the air, heavy and significant. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Someone fresh. My voice was barely a whisper. Who? Who is this, someone fresh? He hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the truth to hit me like a physical blow. His gaze flickered away, towards the door. And then he said her name.
Sarah.
Sarah, who had been hired 6 months ago as a consultant, a seemingly innocuous addition to the team, young, ambitious, and always seemed to be lingering near his office door. Sarah, who I had smiled at in the hallways, offered advice to when she asked about navigating the company culture. Sarah, whose name had occasionally popped up on his phone late at night with cryptic messages, he quickly dismissed. Sarah will be taking over. A revised operations structure, he mumbled, still not meeting my eyes.
Revised. Fresh.
Her. My mind reeled, connecting dots I had deliberately ignored. The late nights. The new phone. The distance. The carefully constructed walls. It wasn't stress. It was a conspiracy. A betrayal orchestrated not just in our personal life, but in the very foundation of our shared professional world. He wasn't just leaving me, he was erasing me, replacing me with her in my home, in my life, in my company. The company we built. The meeting ended quickly after that, a blur of clinical terms and his obvious discomfort, disguised as professionalism. I gathered the few personal items from my office, the small framed photo of us from our wedding day feeling like a relic from another lifetime. The silence of the office felt hostile now. Every desk, every hallway, every smiling employee, did they know? Did they suspect? A silent witness to my public, professional humiliation. I walked out of the building that had been my second home, the cool autumn air hitting my face, and the city outside suddenly felt vast and empty. Where did I go?
Who was I now?
The woman who was defined by her work, her partnership, her shared future, had just had all of it systematically dismantled by the one person she trusted most. The first few days were a blur of shock and disbelief. I wandered through our house, the house we chose together, decorated together, planned a future in, and it felt foreign, haunted by his presence and the sickening knowledge of his deceit. Every object seemed to mock me, the couch we curled up on, the kitchen where we cooked meals, the bedroom that was now just a space filled with the heavy silence of unspoken accusations and lies. I saw him, and the man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a stranger with cold eyes and a defensive posture. He acted as if I was the problem, my shock and hurt and inconvenience. I tried to talk to him, to understand, to somehow salvage years of history. But he shut down, offering only platitudes about different paths and necessary changes. He minimized my role in the company, dismissing my contributions as merely support staff. My blood ran cold. Support staff? I built the systems that made his vision possible. I managed the people, the finances, the logistics. I was the engine room, and he was calling me a passenger. The disrespect cut deeper than the firing itself. It was an utter erasure of my value, my identity. The whispers started, or maybe I just started hearing them. Friends calling, tentative, asking if I was okay, if I knew. Social media became a minefield. Photos of Sarah in my old office, at company events I would have been leading, laughing with my husband. It was a deliberate, public rubbing of salt in the wound. He wasn't just replacing me. He was showcasing her, parading his betrayal under the guise of business as usual. I tried looking for other jobs. My resume, so heavily weighted with my experience at the company we founded, felt suddenly meaningless. How do you explain being fired by your husband from a company you built together because he's having an affair with your replacement?
The story sounded too dramatic, too unbelievable.
The interviews were awkward, filled with veiled questions about why I left such a successful role. I felt like a pariah, tainted by the mess he had created. The financial pressure started mounting too. Our joint accounts were suddenly less accessible. He started talking about separating assets, his tone businesslike and ruthless, as if discussing a hostile takeover, not the dissolution of a marriage. He started bringing Sarah to company events, not just internal ones, but public industry functions. Photos appeared online, polished and carefully curated, showing them together, a power couple, the new faces of the company. My company. I saw them smiling, his arm around her waist, her hand on his arm, in the very spaces where he and I had stood years earlier, celebrating our first funding round, our first major client. It felt like a systematic attempt to erase not just my presence, but my entire history with the company, with him. He was writing a new narrative, one where I was a footnote, a relic of the past, while he and his new partner, professional and personal, soared into the future. The pain was a physical ache in my chest, a constant, dull throb that intensified with every new piece of evidence of their life together. I was not just grieving the loss of my marriage and my career. I was grieving the deliberate, malicious theft of my identity and my past. One night, I couldn't sleep. The silence of the house pressed in on me. I got up and went to my old study, the one that had become just a spare room since I'd been fired. I sat at the desk, the one that had been pushed against the wall, gathering dust. I opened my laptop, the one I used to use for work, and found myself scrolling through old company files. Project proposals, marketing plans, early financial projections. And then I found it. Not something hidden or nefarious, but something mundane. An employee directory from 3 years ago. I scrolled through it, my fingers tracing familiar names. And then I saw it. Sarah's name. But not in the consultant section. She was listed as a junior marketing assistant. Her start date was 5 years ago. Not 6 months. 5 years. The air left my lungs. 5 years. Not a new hire brought in for fresh expertise, not a sudden, unexpected connection. This had been going on for 5 years. An affair simmering in the background of our lives, our work, our partnership. 5 years of lies, of stolen moments, of calculated deception. And she wasn't just a consultant. She was someone he had brought into the company years ago, someone who had been working under my nose, maybe even in my department at some point, before being moved to a position closer to him, closer to the power. The consultant role was just the final stage of bringing her into the inner circle, preparing her to step into my shoes. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a sudden lapse in judgment, a regrettable mistake. This was a long-term, deliberate plot. They had planned this. They had built their relationship, their future, on the ruins of mine. The firing wasn't just about getting me out of the way personally, it was about getting me out of the way professionally, so she could step into the role she had been groomed for. They were dismantling my life piece by calculated piece. The shock turned into something colder, harder. The grief gave way to a searing, purifying anger. 5 years. He looked me in the eye for 5 years, shared our life, built our company, all while cultivating his replacement. That night, something shifted. The tears stopped. The wandering stopped. The paralysis lifted. I looked at the dusty desk, the muted room, the reflection of a woman who had been heartbroken and lost. And I saw something else. A woman who was finally, truly awake. They thought they had won. They thought they had erased me. But they had only made me invisible, which, in some ways, is a superpower. I had been watching from the shadows he cast, and I had seen the truth. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't beg. I didn't ask for explanations. The midpoint shift wasn't just an emotional realization. It was a fundamental reshaping of my reality and my place in it. I was no longer the discarded wife, the fired executive. I was the woman who knew their secret. I was the ghost in their machine. And ghosts sometimes can haunt. The months that followed were a strange duality. Publicly, I maintained a quiet profile. I finalized the divorce with a chilling calm, agreeing to terms that seemed less than favorable on the surface, giving up claims on certain assets, certain shares in the company. He seemed relieved, almost smug, thinking I was weak, defeated, just wanting it all to end quickly. He didn't know I was playing a different game. He saw me as a problem to be managed, a loose end to be tied up. He didn't see me as an opponent. Sarah was now officially head of operations, her name on all the company documents, her face on the website. They were living openly together, their curated happiness a constant, low-grade ache I learned to live with like a stone in my shoe. But beneath the surface of my quiet withdrawal, a new life was building. I reached out to my family. My family isn't just family in the traditional sense. They are builders, investors, quiet giants in the world of finance and industry. We had always been close, but I had deliberately kept my work life separate, wanting to build something with him, just the two of us, without relying on their shadow or their resources. Now, that fierce independence felt naive, even foolish. I told them everything. The story poured out of me, not just the bare facts of the firing and the affair, but the years of dedication, the detailed knowledge I had of the company's inner workings, its strengths, its vulnerabilities. I spoke of the 5-year lie, the deliberate, calculated nature of the betrayal. My family listened, their initial shock hardening into something cold and protective. My father, a man who had built an empire with quiet determination, looked at me, his eyes sharp and assessing. "So," he said finally, his voice low. "They took your company, it wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, and a promise of retribution." My brothers, equally formidable in their respective fields, nodded in grim agreement. They didn't see this as a personal squabble, they saw it as a hostile takeover of something I had a right to, something I had built. They saw it as an insult to the family. And the family does not tolerate insults. The deepening crisis wasn't just the public humiliation or the financial strain. It was the chilling realization of their power, their control. He still held the reins at the company, and he used that power to make my life difficult in small, insidious ways. Legal filings were drawn out, unnecessarily complex. He spread rumors about my instability, my alleged incompetence in the final months before I was fired. He tried to isolate me from former colleagues, painting me as bitter and unbalanced. It felt like a deliberate campaign to dismantle not just my professional standing, but my very sanity. There were days I doubted myself, days the isolation felt crushing. The carefully constructed walls of my composure threatened to crumble. All seemed lost when the legal battle stalled, when friends became distant, when the company seemed to be thriving, mocking my absence. But the anger, the cold, hard core of fury ignited by the 5-year lie, sustained me. It was a clean-burning fuel, keeping me warm in the face of his icy manipulations. I met with my family's team, lawyers, financial analysts, strategic advisors. I shared every detail of the company's structure, its hidden inefficiencies, its key players, its financial health. I knew this company better than he did, better than Sarah ever could. I was the architect. They were just tenants rearranging the furniture. My knowledge was my weapon. It was power they didn't know I possessed, power derived from years of unseen, undervalued work. The turning point wasn't a single dramatic moment, but a quiet, resolute decision made in a room filled with stern-faced lawyers and calculating financiers. My father looked at me across the large conference table. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "This won't be clean. It won't be easy. And once we start, there's no going back." I looked at the faces around the table, the quiet strength of my family, their unwavering support. I thought of the 5 years of lies, the cold dismissal, the public humiliation, the deliberate erasure. I thought of Sarah sitting at my desk, living in my life. "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady, clearer than it had been in months. "They took something from me. It's time to take it back." And more, the decision was made. The plan was set in motion. The game was about to change. I was no longer reacting, I was moving. From victim to player. From haunted to hunter. The acquisition was a masterpiece of quiet, relentless strategy. My family's holding company, a complex web of subsidiaries and blind trusts, began quietly acquiring shares. They were large players known for their strategic moves, but my husband, blinded by his own hubris and consumed by his new life with Sarah, didn't see it coming. He was too focused on the day-to-day, on playing the part of the successful CEO, on solidifying his new relationship, to notice the subtle shifts in the market, the quiet accumulation of stock. My knowledge of the company's finances, its true valuation, its vulnerabilities, proved invaluable. We knew where to strike, how to apply pressure points he didn't even know existed. The process took months, a tense, nail-biting period of waiting, watching, pulling invisible strings. I stayed out of sight, a ghost orchestrating events from the periphery. My divorce was finalized, the financial settlement seemingly modest from his perspective. He thought he was rid of me cleanly. He had no idea the true cost was still accumulating. The climax arrived not with a bang, but with the calculated precision of a surgeon's scalpel.
It was a Monday morning board meeting.
I wasn't there, of course. I was miles away, sitting in a quiet office building owned by my family, staring at a monitor, connected via a secure feed. My father and one of my brothers were in the meeting room, representing the newly formed majority shareholder. The agenda was mundane. Quarterly reports, operational updates, delivered by Sarah, I later learned, her voice confident, oblivious. My husband sat at the head of the table, his usual position of power. Then, my father cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said, his voice calm, cutting through the corporate chatter. "Before we proceed, there's an announcement. As of this morning, my holding company, through a series of recent transactions, has acquired a controlling interest in this company." The screen went blurry for a second as someone in the room fumbled with a camera.
Gasps, murmurs.
My husband's face, which I could see clearly on my screen, went slack with shock. His eyes widened, darting around the room, searching for confirmation, for understanding. He looked utterly blindsided, frozen. He hadn't seen it. He hadn't known. His carefully constructed kingdom was crumbling around him, and he had no defense. My brother spoke next. Effective immediately, he announced, his voice crisp and authoritative, there will be changes in management. The current CEO. Your position is terminated. My husband flinched, as if struck. Terminated. The word he had used so casually to dismiss me now turned back on him. His face was a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish out of water, gills flapping uselessly. Then came the moment I had anticipated, the delicious, cold satisfaction of seeing the architect of my pain face his own consequence. Sarah, sitting beside him, looking equally stunned, finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of the situation. Her eyes darted from my husband's frozen face to my father and brother, the new powers in the room. Her carefully built position, her new life, was based entirely on his power, his protection. And now, that power was gone. The next words were spoken by my brother, directed, I imagine, at Sarah. The head of operations role will be reviewed.
Ms. Sarah.
Your position is also under immediate review, pending assessment. Review. Pending assessment. Corporate speak for, your next. Sarah's face, moments ago confident and poised, crumpled. The color drained from her cheeks. She looked terrified. This wasn't the smooth transition she'd envisioned. This wasn't the effortless step into a powerful role beside her lover. This was chaos, uncertainty, the rug pulled out from under her with brutal efficiency. She looked at my husband, her face pleading, but he was still frozen, staring blankly ahead, unable to offer comfort or solutions. He couldn't even save himself. And then she did it. In the middle of the stunned silence, Sarah pushed back her chair. It scraped loudly against the floor. She stood up, her movements jerky, panicked. I quit, she blurted out, her voice high and shaky. I quit. I don't need this. She grabbed her bag and practically ran from the room, her departure abrupt and utterly undignified. My husband watched her go, his head slowly turning. His expression was one of utter bewilderment, betrayal even. The mistress he had risked everything for, the woman he had replaced me with, had just abandoned him at the first sign of trouble. He was left alone, exposed, stripped of his power, his partner, his company, all in the span of minutes. He looked utterly defeated, his posture slumping, his eyes vacant. He was well and truly frozen, a monument to his own undoing. He fired me for her, and she quit when things got tough, leaving him with nothing but the ruins he created. The turn of tables wasn't just taking back the company. It was watching the two people who betrayed me betray each other, their alliance dissolving under pressure, exposing the fragile, self-serving nature of their bond. The aftermath is quiet. The storm has passed, leaving behind a landscape irrevocably changed. I walked back into the company headquarters a few days later, not as the fired employee, not even as the silent owner behind the scenes, but as an advisor, a consultant brought in to facilitate the transition. The irony wasn't lost on me. The air still smells of polished wood, but my husband's cologne is gone. His office is empty, impersonal. Sarah's desk in the operations department is cleared, a stark, empty space where her carefully placed personal items once Saturday. Walking the halls, familiar faces look at me with a mixture of shock, curiosity, and relief. They knew. Of course, they knew. The whispers, the tension, the awkwardness, it all made sense now. There's no grand declaration, no triumphant speeches. Just the quiet process of rebuilding. My family is running things now, with my brother taking over as interim CEO. My role is advisory, helping to steer the company back onto a stable course, cleansing it of the inefficiencies and the toxic culture that had begun to fester under my husband's distracted leadership. There's a profound sense of something, not exactly victory. The cost was too high for simple triumph. It's more like a cold, quiet satisfaction. Justice served not by fate, but by careful planning and leveraging the resources I had always had, but chose not to use until pushed to the absolute limit. The pain of the betrayal is still there, a dull ache that may never fully fade. Years of history, a shared life, reduced to ashes by deceit. But the shame is gone. The feeling of being erased is gone. I am here. My contributions are acknowledged, valued. The company, my company, is safe. My husband? I hear things. He's struggling. Without the company, without the power and status it gave him, he's adrift. Sarah is gone, moved on to find her next opportunity, her next powerful man. Their connection was transactional, built on ambition and convenience, and it dissolved the moment the transaction was no longer profitable for her. He is left with the consequences of his choices, the wreckage of the life he destroyed. I feel no joy in his suffering, only a detached acknowledgement of cause and effect. This experience stripped me bare, tore down everything I thought was stable and true. But it also revealed a strength I didn't know I possessed. The ability to endure, to plan, to fight back when all seemed lost. I learned that trust, once broken, leaves irreparable cracks. I learned that the structures we build, whether companies or relationships, require constant vigilance and a solid foundation of truth. And I learned that sometimes the quietest revolutions are the most devastating. I didn't just get my company back, I got myself back. A harder, colder, but ultimately more resilient version of the woman he tried to erase. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.